Welcome to the What a Word podcast, a podcast where you can be encouraged, inspired, and uplifted. Join us weekly as we have real conversations with real people overcoming real obstacles. We guarantee you that as you tune in weekly, you will join us in saying, wow, what a word. And now here's your host, Ryan Sharp.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the What a Word podcast. We're at episode 49 and episode 50 comes, God willing, next week, and we'll close out season 1 after that. And I want to thank you as always for joining me on this journey. I'm honored to share conversations that inspire, and I believe today will be no different. I'll say a little more about my guest and our conversation today, but I want to remind you guys that last week we issued a challenge, the Minaga Complaint Challenge. And this is an effort to highlight instances of gratitude. And thanks to many of my listeners, in particular my good friend Othniel, there is a movement now on Facebook where individuals are posting stories of gratitude with the hashtag Minaga Complaint. And I'm so inspired by it. And I hope to share my own story in the next few days as well. Today, I'm thankful for family, for life, for health. And my daughter Talia also celebrates her 10th birthday. So I'm very grateful for that. Talia, we love you. We are here to support all your dreams. You have a community of well-wishers. So just know that you can dream big dreams, and we're here for you. My guest today is Dr. Marsha Peart. She is a family medicine physician, currently board certified, and today she shares her story. Now, many times we see individuals who are successful, and we don't often hear the backstories, the challenges, the hardships, the setbacks, and we'll cover that today. Please share this episode with someone who is going through a tough season. I believe they will be inspired by it. I look forward to season 2, which will come at the end of episode 50, and I believe we'll have more stories of overcoming, of faith, of resilience, of perseverance. Please join me now in welcoming my good friend and my guest, Dr. Marsha Peart, to the What a Word podcast. Marsha.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me.
So I want to start off by asking you, in this season, and whenever you and I speak, you exude gratitude. What in this season, when you think of being grateful, do you have reasons to be grateful for?
You mean currently?
Currently, yes.
Oh my goodness, what don't I have to be grateful for? Just being here, having this opportunity to speak with you in this context, hearing you refer to me as Dr. Peart, not because I think, I need the accolade, but just to know that after everything, it's been accomplished. Grateful that I even think to share this story without worrying about, any negativity that can come from it, because there could have been a lot of shame and embarrassment, and was to some degree along the way. But now I'm, proud and eager to share my experience in hopes of just helping even one person. I'm grateful that my faith is intact, and I believe that God does miraculous things, and that He is still working with, for, and through us each and every day. Grateful for a supportive family and friends who just kept riding with me, no matter how crazy or impossible things seemed. every aspect of my life is an opportunity to be grateful, honestly.
Awesome words. When did you know, when was the earliest time, as you can recall, when did you know you wanted to become a doctor?
So this might sound cliche, but honestly, it was sometime between the ages of like 5 and 7. Initially, I wanted to be a teacher for a very short while because I always loved children. And I had really amazing teachers in elementary school. And I wanted to touch lives the way, even at an early age, they touched mine. And so for a very short while, I wanted to be a teacher. But then, and I know this might be a little taboo now, but when we were growing up, we were only allowed to watch The Cosby Show during the week. And the representation that Claire and Cliff Huxtable and their 5 children um, had on television for young Black families, I think anyone who has watched the show, you can't but acknowledge that that was something remarkable. And Dr. Huxtable was an obstetrician, and that was my first introduction to that word. I knew, a doctor delivered a baby, but hearing obstetrics or obstetrician, I learned it from the Cosby Show. And there was one particular episode where this new father was describing what it was like to see his child come into the world. And Dr. Huxtable's response to that, it was just like, I want to do that. And so that happened between the ages of 5 and 7. I don't remember specifically when, but it was since then. And it has stayed with me ever since.
That is powerful. You reference your family, and your bio tells a story of you going to different places and institutions, and we'll get a little more into that. But what I see earliest is the Wyoming Seminary College prep school. Now, how was that decision with your family? You leaving, born in the Bronx, leaving now to go to a top-rated private boarding school in Pennsylvania. What was that like, that decision-making process?
So it wasn't something that I necessarily chose. My mother had an experience with boarding school while she lived in Jamaica. And so she wanted that for us. And I was kind of the guinea pig for this little experiment. And so when the opportunity came for me to attend or at least apply to high school, it was with the understanding that if at all possible, boarding school was going to be it. And I actually didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave my home, my family, my friends. I didn't understand even why I needed to go away. They were great. There were, great high schools in New York City, but I am 100% glad I went. So although it was with reluctance initially, and that was just, reluctance in my mind because I really wasn't saying I'm not going, right? But from day one, when I arrived, their process for orientation was just so remarkable that you kind of forgot that you were no longer going to be able to be with your family. Like, you weren't just visiting and then going back home with everybody else, that you were staying there. So I didn't want to go to boarding school, but it's just another reason for which I'm grateful that I actually had the opportunity to go and went.
What was Pennsylvania like for you culturally?
Oh, well, so coming from the Bronx, where, I'm surrounded by people who look like me for the most part, right? You have West Indians from various islands. You have African Americans, you have Latinxers. I mean, you just have people from diverse cultures. Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, which is where Kingston is, it's different. It's predominantly Caucasian. And, I attended public school for elementary and junior high. And while my public schools were gifted, there was still a majority minority presence there, which was the total opposite in Pennsylvania. I think for the upper school, there were probably like 400 something students. So it was small. And I think about, I think in my class, there were definitely less than 20 of us that were minorities. So I wasn't completely unfamiliar with just being around non-minority individuals, but it was very evident that there weren't many of us there. As far as the school is concerned, I had no issues there. They were very sensitive to the fact that, the town in which they exist did not necessarily represent cultural diversity, let's put it that way. And they did very well at shielding us and, just making sure that we were comfortable. And they made sure that their faculty and staff were all very, open-minded individuals who understood everybody doesn't look like them and everyone is coming with different experiences, because it was also an international school. So we had people from all over the world there. The school recruited internationally. The town itself, while there, I had my first blatant experiences with racism.
Wow.
They weren't many, but they did stand out because, again, coming from the Bronx, people look like you all the time. I remember going to the supermarket in high school and little white children just staring like, what are you? Who are you? It was eerie almost, because it's just like, I don't know exactly why you're staring at me like this, And there was one particular incident in a convenience store not far from the school. My roommate and I at the time, we went in to just buy like some snacks or something. And we were in the store for a while because we weren't sure what we wanted. And then, you're reading ingredients and prices and all that. And the I don't know if it was a manager, clerk, or whomever, but he was extremely rude. And he made a comment to us. We were both African American students, and it was clearly he was clearly biased in his approach to us, and he accused us of stealing or wanting to steal, even though we had nothing on us. And we left the store, and it was just a horrible experience. We told our dean at the time. She was also my field hockey coach, and she was a white woman, and she went and put him in his place, basically. And so it was good to know that she did that, because it just, reminded us that we are supported here, we belong here. And, as you're in high school, so that's such an impressionable time. And if that had gone some other way, let's say the school didn't, and no one went down there and let the man know, you can't treat our students like this, you can't treat people like this, maybe that could have affected us differently. I don't know. But I'm just grateful that we were aware of the support that we had, and the school administration did their part to let this person know that's not how we treat people, especially our students.
And that support is important, man. And I'm so happy that you had that confirmation early that the school was willing to stand by students of color. That is pretty
Right.
significant. Now, my research team tells me that currently, and I imagine even back then, the tuition cost was nothing to sneeze at. Tell us how the process was for you and um, what opportunities availed itself for you to go to that school.
Well, yes, tuition was, I mean, even thinking about the fact that you have to pay to go to school, right? Because again, I'm coming from the public school system, but I was aware of, private school because adventure school, you have to pay for it as well. Um, so I actually didn't apply to high school. I applied to the A Better Chance scholarship program, which is one such that students of, well, minority students or those living in inner cities have an opportunity to go to some of the best high schools in the country, and you are financially supported in doing so. So I applied for Prep for Prep and the Oliver program. I don't even know if they're in existence now. I'm clearly dating myself, but I didn't get accepted into those programs. And I believe it was my guidance counselor in junior high school or middle school, but I can't remember for sure, who sent my application over to the A Better Chance program. And I'll refer to it as ABC going forward, because I hadn't heard of them at the time. And someone from that organization reached out to me, and they actually allowed me to interview over the phone, which apparently was unprecedented at the time. And they accepted me into the program and then sent my application out to different schools. And I was able to choose which one I wanted to attend. And we did it based on who gave us the best financial package. And it was Wyoming Seminary. And it wasn't unreasonably far away. It's about a 3-hour drive from our house. So that's how we ended up selecting Wyoming Seminary. And it was pretty much paid for in full. There may have been a small family contribution, but I also became an RA in my 3rd and 4th year. And as a perk, I guess you could say, for that, room and board is completely covered as well. So my family didn't have to bear the brunt of the cost at all.
That's awesome. And you are confirming at this time that you are definitely going to go into the field of medicine?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. And so now from Wyoming Seminary College Prep School, you are looking at colleges and you decide, I think everything works out for you to go to another elite institution, Johns Hopkins. Tell us about the process and what led to your choosing Johns Hopkins.
Right. So I, as a junior, once you get to high school, for the most part, in terms of how I was raised, it was just always understood college was the next step. So I've always known that I was going to go to college, especially in wanting to practice medicine. There was no, I had to go to college in order to go to medical school in this country, right? So when it came time to apply to college, I had done well in school all along. In high school, I was doing AP courses and all of the things that you do to have a robust application transcript. So, but I never really thought about applying to what are considered some of the best schools in the country. And, you know, Hopkins was always on my radar because I knew I wanted to practice medicine, and just because of their notoriety in the world of research and medicine, I was always going to apply there. But then my mom, she suggested that I apply to a couple other schools, like some Ivy League schools, which I honestly wasn't going to. No particular reason. I didn't assume that because I wanted to be a doctor, or because my grades were stellar, that, well, I have to apply to Ivy League. But I did it really to please my mom. And it turned out that I was blessed enough to be accepted to not only Johns Hopkins, but also Princeton and Cornell. And so, amongst other schools, but those were the top three of the ones to which I applied. And I clearly had a difficult decision to make. And so I visited all of the campuses, spoke with students, professors, went through their whole visiting process. And but in addition to all of that, I prayed. And hopefully what people will, at least one thing that will be gained from, this interview, I pray about everything. There is not one aspect of my life, great or small, that I don't pray about. And so I had good experiences when I visited each of the schools. Some were better than others, but I was torn. And so in praying, I felt compelled to choose Johns Hopkins. I really can't explain it beyond that. And so that's where I ended up choosing to go.
Did you feel ready to, and I'll use the word fly, because I'm seeing a journey here where at your earliest years, your formative years, you're separated from family in terms of distance. I'm sure the support, your bio tells a story clearly of support and encouragement and affirmation from your family members, but certainly the distance away might have been impactful.
So it was, in that I was on my own, right? This was not, so when people hear boarding school, they tend to think that, oh, it's very strict and you have someone there always, telling you what to do and making sure that you do every single thing. That is not the case. And it's also it's not reform school, right? So you're not sent there because you're being punished or you need to learn you need to be disciplined in some way. No, this was college prep school. And you were pretty independent, even, between the ages of 14 and 18. So it was truly a preparatory environment, one can say. You had to choose your classes. You were responsible for getting yourself up and going to class, and, just ensuring that you did what you needed to do based on what you were trying to accomplish thereafter. Another component for me, though, was my faith. And I could have said religion, but it's more than that, right? Because as a Seventh-day Adventist, one of the major distinctions is that we have the Sabbath, which starts Friday night and sunset Saturday, right? From sunset to sunset. So as a teenager, in your prime of your teenage years, like, that's your weekend. I'm away from my parents. They didn't have to know what I was doing. There was no one reporting. There was no one checking in. And I got an allowance every Friday, right? So you were allowed to leave campus. You just had to let someone know where you were going. You were allowed to spend the night at your friend's house. We had the freedom to move about. But I chose to continue to acknowledge and honor the Sabbath. And that's something that I wanted to do. I didn't have to. And I decided that at 14, the Sabbath was important to me. And regardless of where I was or who was watching over me in terms of a person or not, I was going to honor God because he asked us to. And so when I think back to that time, I realized that's what solidified my faith, or that's when I truly, became anchored in this thing, because it was clearly a choice.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. And now, Johns Hopkins, clearly you have the preparation now. You are, from all indications, a great student, adept in the sciences, like physics, etc. How was the process now in terms of choosing a major? How was that process for you?
So, you have the traditional science majors when you're pre-med. The assumption is that, you're going to do something along the lines of biology, chemistry. And I mean, I could have, but Hopkins also gave the opportunity to major in public health and other majors. And at that time, it was becoming increasingly popular for pre-med students to not necessarily major in the sciences, because there was, the understanding that now schools were looking for people who were more diverse in their academic endeavors. And so you could literally major in anything at this point, and as long as you were following a pre-med curriculum. So I majored in public health, and one of the main reasons I did that was specifically at Hopkins, you were allowed to take, as a part of your requirements, you had to take graduate courses at the School of Public Health. And so I, again, thinking ahead, felt that that would be, really good preparation for graduate level studies. Although at the time, I wasn't specifically thinking graduate studies in public health, but I just figured this was my opportunity to be exposed to learning at that level, because we didn't take these graduate courses on our undergraduate campus or just a group of undergrads. We took the course with graduate students in real time. And so we had the same requirements as the graduate students, even though we were still in undergrad. There was no exception made. There was no changes to the curriculum. There were no changes to the curriculum simply because we were still in undergrad. So I thought that level of rigor would have been beneficial for whatever was going to come next for me.
We will return after a short break. Traveling Niece Experiences is here to help you create new memories, one experience at a time. Contact Traveling Niece Experiences at travelingnieceexperiences.com. That's the word traveling, NESE experiences.com, to book your summer 2021 travel. They are ready to help you create your next memorable experience. At the end of Johns Hopkins, were you locked into doing obstetrics and gynecology? And why the journey then to Ecuador to serve as a volunteer?
Okay.
Amplify that for me.
Okay. So, yes. When I graduated Hopkins, the goal was still to practice OBGYN. However, I was not, so this would have been the first time that I became non-traditional in the sense that I didn't go straight through. I didn't matriculate from one level into the next. So I was told that my MCAT scores weren't competitive enough, and it was not going to be likely that I got into medical school. So I did not apply right away. However, I needed to do something during that time. And I always believe that whatever I'm going to do, it needs to, one, reflect what it is that what my goal is ultimately. It needs to, add something to whatever I've already accomplished. So during one of my public health courses at the graduate school, before I graduated, I encountered a nurse who was a guest lecturer at the time. She actually did work at that hospital in Ecuador. And I did ask her when she presented to us if they allowed, student volunteers. And she said yes. And that was it was several months before I knew I wasn't going to be applying to medical school. And so, at least not right away. And I reached out to her and I asked her, for contact information for the individual or persons in Ecuador to try to arrange me being a volunteer there. And that's kind of how things got started with me going to Enrique Sotomayor.
Awesome points. What I've been doing, Marsha, you may not know, is I've been counting since our conversation started the amount of, I like to call them angels on earth, people who came into your life. And I'll include your family as well, but people who surrounded your early formative years leading to this point,
Mm-hmm.
who made a difference. I don't imagine, and I say this humorously, I think some of them went back to heaven after they interacted with you because of the import and the impact. But you're going to point to a few more. I know this already because we've spoken. But tell us about your experience in Ecuador and the angels that came into play while you were there.
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? So
Take your time, take your time.
Clearly from the beginning, this has been, a divine composition that I just happen to be involved with, right? So it should be understood that I didn't go to Ecuador with any organization or as a part of like the Peace Corps or anything like that. I went as an individual myself, volunteering at this hospital. So getting there was interesting. I literally, Googled phone numbers and reached out to whomever I could. One such example, I was trying to contact someone because I needed to arrange housing. I had already received the approval by the hospital to be there as a volunteer, and we decided on dates and the amount of time that I would be there, the days that I would work, and so forth. And when I say work, I'm not getting paid. This is all volunteer. And so I needed housing. Some of my initial efforts failed. I hit some roadblocks, but finally I was able to Google. So what I thought was, since this is a completely unfamiliar place, being a part of a church, and when I say church, I mean religious body, I figured I would try to go through the church to find housing, because in my mind, I just felt like starting there would be a safer option. So and prior to that, I was presented with the option of subletting someone's one of the residents' apartments, but that fell through. So that's why I really had to figure out on my own where I was going to stay. So I Googled the conference for that region. And for those who don't know, the Adventist Church is set up into conference geographically based. And so when I say conference, that's what I'm referring to. So I got a number, and at the time phone cards were a thing because WhatsApp wasn't. And so I bought a phone card and I called the office, and by God's grace, the only person in the office who spoke English was the youth director for the region. So I explained to him, who I was and what I was hoping to do, and that I needed a place to stay. That was like the last detail that needed to be ironed out in order for me to get there. So he said, don't worry about it. He will reach out to the churches and they will figure it out. And so we corresponded back and forth via email for a while. And eventually he told me it came down to 2 families who were willing, and they were just trying to decide who it was going to be. And shortly before I left the US, he said, so there's a family, you're going to be staying with them. We'll pick you up at the airport when you arrive. I sent him my flight information, and then I even confirmed it with him the day before, and everything was set as far as I knew. And so I guess you could call him one of my angels as well. And then the family with whom I stayed, all of them, they were angels, because they were just remarkable people, just kind and loving, and I mean everything that a family could possibly be. And they welcomed me with open arms, free of charge, for almost 6 months. I was a part of their family. I had access to, I had my own bedroom. Like, I mean, I lived as though I was one of their own. You couldn't have asked for a better situation. I had dinner with them. Like, I was family. There's there are a couple other angels between there. So the night I arrived, just a little bit before that. Initially, when the idea of me traveling to Ecuador came about, I was just going to go by myself. But sometime after the initial conversation, my mother decided that she felt it would be best if she accompanied me just to get me settled. So after I purchased my ticket, is when we had this conversation. So by that time, when I attempted to purchase hers, my flight was already full. So the only other flight I could get her on for that same day left earlier that morning. So that's what we did. She left in the morning and I left in the afternoon and arrived in the evening. So she got to her hotel. Well, she got to Ecuador before I did. I also booked her hotel, so I knew the name of it, but I didn't pay attention necessarily to its address or anything. So I, get on the flight, get to Ecuador, fine, no issues, get my luggage. At this point, though, it's pretty late. I think it was like after 10, close to 11 at night. And the airport is pretty much shut down. I was told that the youth director that I spoke with, and I think the father from the family that I would be staying, they were going to meet me at the airport. So I'm waiting, go through customs, everything. I see all the people that I get off the plane with leaving the airport slowly, and I'm still there. Nobody has my name on a card. Everything is pretty much closed. There was a security guard, and he was wondering, where's my ride, because it's late and it's time to go. And I was just like, I don't know. And I didn't really have a name. I had a phone number for the director, but that was the conference office. So I didn't have a direct phone number for anyone. And although there was a payphone in the airport, or at least the section where I was, I couldn't use it because it required a card. You couldn't use any coins. And I couldn't purchase a card because the place to purchase the card had already closed. So I had no way of communicating with anyone. I didn't know what I was going to do. So
you must have been terrified.
Yes, I was. But one of the things is I can be terrified on the inside, but it doesn't necessarily show. And I was in a space where I was just like, I have to do something because I can't stay here and I don't know where I'm supposed to be. So I prayed and I was just like, God, just help me. And so there were some cab drivers outside of the airport. And again, once you leave, you can't go back in, right? So I asked the cab driver to take me to the Best Western Hotel because that's where my mother was staying. And he says to me, which one? And I was just like, I don't know. And I told him I need to find my mom, and can we go to each one until I find her? And he said, okay. And
how was your Spanish, Marsha? How was your Spanish at this point? Because you're communicating now in Spanish. In only Spanish.
Right. He knew some English just because he's at the airport, but and I knew some Spanish just from taking it in high school and college, but I was not speaking Spanish on a regular basis. So it was very little conversational, like very basic conversational Spanish. So that in and of itself was a barrier in that moment.
So it's late, you're a woman, and I don't imagine the transport services there are entirely regulated.
Yes, yeah. It's completely unnerving, but yeah. I was just like, I have no other option. So I just prayed, God, keep me safe. I'm also, a tourist, basically, right? Coming from the United States with all this luggage, and I don't know where I'm going. And I have no concept of the lay of this land. And so while we were driving, somehow we started talking about God, if my memory serves me correctly. And I don't remember the details of the conversation, but it was enough to let me know this person was safe. He was okay. And so we pulled up to the first Best Western, and this was maybe like after 35, 40-minute ride or so. And I got out the car, the cab, and I went to the receptionist. Now, remember, I don't know if my mother's here or not. And so I let the receptionist know that I asked them if someone by my mother's name was staying at the hotel.
So Marsha, I just want our listeners to know the odds you're working against right here.
Exactly. I didn't have a lot of money on me because I just landed, and the exchange was open, but like just from traveling in the past, I never exchanged all my money at the airport, right? Sure. So I exchanged a little bit, and so listen, it was all God. It was all God. But then it gets better. So at this point, I'm starving, right? And everything's closed. There was no room service, right? But my mother had extra food. And she tells me, she was like, it's interesting. When she went to buy food earlier, something said to her, get another sandwich. And it didn't make sense to her because she was like, I'm not going to possibly eat this. Like, I guess maybe I'm planning for the next day. I don't know. She bought, the additional meal, not knowing why she was even buying it. And it was in preparation for me to show up that night.
Wow.
And I mean, it just goes to show, right? Because did I have to eat? No, I could have gone to sleep and been fine. But even that small detail, God prepared for.
Wow.
So it's like when you think about the text that, multiple texts, but he talks about providing for the birds, the fowl of the air, like every aspect of God's creation is taken care of, and they worry not about it. And, the sentiment is how much more will he take care of us? And I didn't need food that night, right? Like I was satisfied with just having a place to stay and, not be kidnapped or like any number of things, right?
So many things had to align.
Exactly. And they all did, even down to the smallest detail. And that was outside of me. There was nothing that I did to influence any of this. So
powerful. And I'm making some assumptions about the Enrique Sotomayor Maternity Hospital in Ecuador. What did you find there serving as a volunteer, as you described for 6 months, about some of the inequities in terms of our treatment facilities worldwide?
Oh my goodness. So it was a public hospital. And I was only in one part of the hospital. I just, it was a maternity hospital. So they did, it wasn't just labor and delivery. They did all aspects of obstetrics and gynecology there, but I mainly dealt with the obstetric side of things. So, funding for the hospital is not great. It was in, the poorer location in the city, and most of the individuals who sought care there were uninsured. So you can imagine you're not getting, you're not experiencing healthcare under the best circumstances. Now, I was not privy to what the other side of healthcare looked like as far as that country or even that city had to offer. So I'm not trying to compare anything, but just what I saw there, it was difficult. The patients were pretty young. The average age was about 16 or 17. And the way it was set up at the time, and again, this was quite many years ago, you had a room where the women labored, and then you had a room where they actually delivered the baby. And so when you get into the corridor, approaching the labor room, you just hear screaming, because for the most part, this is done without anesthesia. And
Mercy.
It's, you can imagine what that's like. And so you have these young women just screaming, and I'd go from when I'm in that section, from woman to woman, just trying to help them get through each contraction. Then eventually they dilate enough to where it's time to push, and they get wheeled across the way to the delivery room. And you have multiple women again pushing simultaneously. It's kind of, it looks more akin to the emergency room setting where you have a lot of different stretchers and there's just a curtain between, right? They weren't in private rooms where you get to labor according to your birth plan, and you have all these, you have privacy. There's no privacy beyond the curtain between you and the next woman who you don't know trying to have a baby. And so they would deliver whatever, if an intervention was needed postpartum, it was provided, and the babies would then be wheeled to the nursery, which is a little bit down the hall, and you would have multiple babies in one like stainless steel. I mean, the it looks more like a cart, but it was, the bassinet, right? But it was bigger than what we traditionally see as a bassinet in the hospital. And that's how it was at that hospital at that time. The providers were phenomenal. The school system is also different in Ecuador in that you don't have undergraduate studies, right? As it is with a lot of other countries outside of the United States. So the residents some of them were younger than myself, because it's kind of like you do high school, but it's a blended program. You do high school and then you go into whatever field it is that you qualify for. And so you're pretty young going to like your professional school, but the attendings, the residents, everybody was just phenomenal. They understood like these were not ideal conditions, and they did their best with what they had for these young girls.
Sobering, man, because so much of what you do, I imagine, attaches to compassion and empathy. How were the working days for you emotionally?
So it's interesting because every day I'm in this foreign land, right, with no family that is familiar to me. Now, again, the people with whom I lived, they were phenomenal, and they literally were my family while I was there. So I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel lonely, but you still miss just being home, So I carried that with me every day, but it was okay. Then, I would take the bus to and from the hospital, and that's interesting because their buses are, some of them look more like what we know as school buses. And, there's, they weren't necessarily clean or high tech, because it's a very impoverished neighborhood in which I was working. So even riding the public bus every day and just wondering, like, am I sticking out like a sore thumb? I haven't mastered this language yet. To stop, you have to yell out "pare," which is stop. And, you hope that you can navigate through the crowd on the bus in time to get off. Or, I mean, just all these little things you have to learn. And every day that I went in, I have all of that. And then I also have the idea that I'm here because I'm not somewhere else. So that was hard too, but yet still trying to learn as much as I can, because I really believed that this is what I was going to practice one day. And so being in the hospital, doing the work with the physicians and the residents and the attendings, I mean, it made it okay. It made all of the uncomfortable, difficult aspects of simply being there okay, because I was learning. And somehow this was going to facilitate that which in my mind was coming thereafter.
And you return from this wonderful, complicated experience where I imagine by this point you are at least leaning towards obstetrics and gynecology.
I was all in before I
all
got
in.
there. Yeah, it was always obstetrics and gynecology for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So this further confirmed that this was the direction you planned to go in.
I delivered my first baby by myself there, and that was just like, okay, yeah, I'm done. This is it. I mean, not that there was a question up to that point, but I was just all in. Like, I mean, it confirmed how much I loved it and connected with it. And the baby that I delivered actually was pretty big. And when she was born, she had some respiratory issues. And I was just like, oh my gosh, did I do something? They're like, no. So she was born with what you call meconium. So she had a bowel movement in utero. And she also had a cord wrapped around her neck. And so she was blue when she came out, and she did not cry immediately. And so we were there trying to stimulate her. And I mean, we handed her off to the pediatric team, and I kind of held my breath a little bit while she was silent, because I was just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And then she eventually cried, and it was like, oh, I can breathe. But just even experiencing that was phenomenal for me.
Wow. And what are your next steps upon returning?
So while I was there, I was actually studying for the MCAT as well. I volunteered 3 days a week and studied 2 days a week. Just literally stayed in my room, and it was hot. Okay. When I say hot, so I was there during what is fall for the States, but it was like spring going into summer there. And it was just hot, and there was no air conditioning in my room. So I would literally sit in the room studying for hours, just like dripping with sweat. I had like gallons of water that I would just drink to stay hydrated. And I just hunkered down and studied because this is what I had to do. So upon returning, I retook the MCAT, and I was going to reapply. And in that interim period, I worked quite a bit. Again, needing to do something during this interim time. And so I worked at, the years tend to flow together for me, but I always try to do something in the medical field. So again, my CV would reflect a genuine interest. So I worked in the OB/GYN department at Cornell. I worked also at Memorial Sloan Kettering in their interventional radiology department. And then I had a random job at Banana Republic just to take a break from everything. But that was immediately when I came back while I was applying and studying, taking the MCAT and then applying. And then I would volunteer at church with Vacation Bible School, AY leader, whatever I could do. I just tried to do to remain active and move forward, even albeit at a snail's pace.
And this is your journey. It's taking its own time. What is happening to Marsha during these moments, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and otherwise?
So I'm just trying to get there. And for me, there was medical school. I graduated undergrad in 2002. I didn't start medical school until 2010. So initially, so I went to Ecuador, came back. I think I applied. So that would, when I returned from Ecuador, that would have been the first time I actually applied. And it didn't, I didn't get in. It's hard for me to remember sometimes, but I didn't get in. My MCAT score had increased, but it still wasn't, like great. I After that, I did a program in California. Yeah, I've lived all over the place. I did a program in California for people with test taking anxiety. And my anxiety is something, so I'm not like anxious just, walking around. This is very specific to tests. I tend to, be someone who tries to plan, and I think about, all aspects of a situation, whether like how it can go wrong as well as how it can go well. But I wouldn't say that I just walk around on eggshells all the time. No. But when I'm taking a test, like my anxiety doesn't manifest physically. But what happens is my mind just goes blank. And a part of it is just knowing that I'm being timed. And then I also tend to pay attention to everything around me. So as people are finishing and I'm still going, that's weighing on me. It's just like, oh my goodness, why am I not finishing? I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to finish. Or if I get to a question and I get stuck, I try to finish that question rather than getting through the exam in its entirety, because it's just like, I should know this. Why don't I know this? I should know this. I know this. And that's, you can't take a test like that, right? And so I never finish my exams. I would always have large numbers of questions unanswered. And so I went to this program in California to just help sort through the anxiety and get like test taking skills. So I was there for a few months. I lived in California, and I think the program was called, or the practice was called, Above the Bar, and it was, I think, husband and wife I think one may have been a psychiatrist, one was a psychologist, or they were both psychologists. I can't remember. But they were a team, husband and wife team, and they were also Adventist. And they were just great people, more angels, very encouraging. And they were able to show me how anxious I actually got, like my heart rate and things that you can't necessarily see, but physiologically there was something happening when I sat down to take a timed test. But I went through that program, moved back to New York, and let's see, this would be around 2004, I think. So it was after that I think I started working at Cornell, I think. And I was there for some time. I applied to the first graduate program now because it was just kind of like, I still need something to do. And I got into UMDNJ because it was for students who intended to go to medical school. They just needed to boost their credentials. So that was I'm sorry, it's Rutgers, but at the time it was called University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. So I did that master's program. And after that, I applied again. And after graduating that, I think I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering. And yes, and I worked there until I got accepted at SUNY Upstate. So while at Upstate, I reapplied. So I think I've taken the MCAT a couple of times thereafter. I reapplied while at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I was interviewed at one school. And I remember meeting this lady when I went for the interview, and she was in charge of like minority recruitment. We just passed each other in the hallway though. I never actually sat down with her. And when I called to follow up, because I mean, the interviews seemed to have gone well. I hadn't heard from them though, so I called to follow up as to the status of my application. And I was told, somehow I ended up speaking to her, and I was told that I was waitlisted. And unfortunately, where I was on the wait list, they weren't going to get to my name that year. And so I was just like, I was devastated, honestly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was probably the first time I felt that this was probably not going to happen. Not because I didn't want to, but because at that moment, I thought I had no other options. Because by this time, I had taken the MCAT, I don't even know how many times. And, you know, I did all that I could possibly do to, you know, excel at the graduate level. I did research while I was at UMDNJ, and all of this was, you know, with OBGYN in mind. And I had strong letters of recommendation, all of that. But when she told me I was waitlisted, I was just like, I can't apply again. You know, what is going to change in my application from now to the next application cycle? Nothing really. There was nothing else for me to do. And so that was the first time that I thought this was not happening. I was not going to become a doctor. And that was crushing. I was at work at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I had to leave because I couldn't, like emotionally, I couldn't continue the day. And I felt all the emotions. I was angry. I was disappointed. I was sad, because I think I started to grieve not being able to accomplish this thing. And it was just like, but God, why do I feel so strongly about doing this? Why is this in me if it's not what I'm supposed to do? Like, I don't understand. And I've always struggled with like actually hearing God's voice, right? People would always say, oh, God told me. And I'm like, really? Because I don't know what that sounds like. It usually sounds like my voice. But and so I started to just think about, well, did I force myself to be here? You know, all of those thoughts of doubt, and just you question everything, every single thing that you've ever thought and done. It's just like, was I just mistaken this whole time? And I was in a pretty sad place. But it wasn't, it was very short-lived, because I got home and it was like, again, I have to plan. Like, I needed to know what I was going to do next, because I couldn't do nothing. So I started thinking about, well, what can I do? And I was like, well, I guess maybe I can go into midwifery or something. So I was just like, I remember saying to myself, I don't even know how to become a nurse. Like, I finished undergrad. Do I go to nursing school now? I don't know what to do. And my mom's a nurse. So, I mean, it would have been fine. But it was just something that I did not expect or plan for at the time. And while I'm, just having this this moment that was just filled with despair, and I was grieving. My phone.
And this is public. This is public.
Well,
to the extent that your family knows.
Yes, yeah. My family knew, and a couple of friends came over because they knew now, and they knew that I was not okay. And within an hour of the previous phone conversation, my phone rang, and it was the same lady. And she said, so there's actually a way that you can, go to medical school, but it's going to take an extra 2 years. And I was like, I'll do it. There was an option to do like a post-bac, which was going to be 1 year, but I was just like, I already passed, I did all the requirements in undergrad, and I passed all the courses. So the post-bac at this point, she was like, yeah, she wasn't recommending that, but she was just letting me know there is that option. So she recommended the master's. That's what I did. So this program is not something that I was aware of when I applied, because at the time they hadn't advertised it. You had to be invited into the program. And it did not come up as an option during my interview or anything. I did not know about it until she called me back to say there's a way. And that's how I ended up going to medical school. So it was called the Med Scholars Program at the time. And you do the master's, which is 2 years. And upon successful completion of that, you're guaranteed a seat in the medical school.
Marsha, here's what is on my mind, and it's something that came out when you walked us through what your journey was in that moment. We are told at an early age about words like purpose and assignment and journey. We use that word journey freely. There's no time frame on any of those themes though. And we don't know what to expect until we're actually on the journey itself. And I don't know if you had any idea that you would be able to tap into perseverance and resilience. And I mean, while I asked about the public theme that also comes about, is because there are others who are looking on at the journey, hoping to help in any way they can. And I'm sure your parents, in terms of support, probably reached points where they did as much as they could, and they're watching someone they care about go on this journey that is taking a lot of time. It's emotionally taxing on their daughter, and by virtue of that on them as well. I can't imagine what these moments were like, but you've said it in a way that I'm sure it connects to someone else who may be listening, who is going through a journey right now, who can't see the end, but is hearing Marsha tell a story about another angel who didn't even, in my mind, have to even call back. You know what I mean? This could have been like, well, I told her already that she has to wait. She's waitlisted. I'm moving on. There's so many things that come together here for me.
Absolutely. I mean, So throughout the process, I never shied away from anyone's questions about where I am in it, as difficult as it may have been at times to answer, because, people don't know what the process entails. Oftentimes they just know, oh, you want to do this, you apply, you go to school, and then you do it, right? But nobody really talks about what it's like when things don't work out and you still feel inclined to pursue something. My parents don't know the system, they don't know what is required, like what it takes to apply, and they're learning about this as I'm doing it. So it was, difficult is, it doesn't quite capture what it must have been like for, my sisters, my parents looking on, and even my cousins, because at this point, like, everybody's praying for me, right? Like I said, I would never shy away from answering people's questions about where I am in the process. And everybody knew I wanted to be a doctor. It was very evident all along. And so, rightfully so, people would inquire and they would be concerned. And I would just let them know I'm still working on it. I saw pretty much everyone I went to college with graduate with me, go to med school, vet school, engineering, get jobs in engineering, law school, and I was still waiting. My sister, 4 years younger than me, graduated, went to law school, finished, and I'm still waiting. Kids who were younger than I was, finished college, going to grad school, and I'm still waiting. And it just, I didn't know, there was no way to anticipate that this is what it was going to be. And every time I tried, I would assume that I wasn't going to try again until faced with the question, okay, so what do we do now? And automatically it was, I guess I'm going to try again. Even with, not even, but with the exception of the moment I previously described, when I was told that they weren't going to get to my name on the wait list, that was honestly not just the first, but the only time I thought, this is not, I don't want to say it's not going to happen, but I thought I thought there was nothing else I could do. There was nothing else for me to pursue. I won't say only, because it happened again, and we'll get to that. But that was the first time. And it's hard seeing your parents see you go through something and they can't do anything, and watch them process not being able to do anything, but still trying to support you. That was hard. It's also hard watching everyone accomplish what they set out to accomplish, and you're still trying. And it's not because you're not trying. It's just, God, I don't know what's happening here. And I was just like I begged him to take it away, to take this desire away from me, because with it as it was, the only thing I could do was keep trying. And I literally was like, I don't want this because something is not working here. Like, I don't understand this. But every time there was a question of whether you're going to reapply for school or take the MCAT again, I was like, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so I say, without knowing that I would need it. Clearly, as I look back, God gave me a measure of perseverance to get through it, because there's no way to know that this is what the journey would be until it happens. And you don't know how you're going to respond to it until you need to give a response.
That's a word. That is a word. So now this angel has provided a framework for you by giving yet another option.
Mm-hmm.
I believe she may have given you the extra push just by giving this option.
Right. I mean, she opened, that was the door that opened. And so there was no way that I wasn't going to walk through it, because the only reason I was thinking I needed to find something else, because I thought all my options were exhausted and, you know, I had no other choice. But then she showed me the door and it was open. And before even really knowing what it was, I said yes. Because I was like, oh, okay, God. So
Yeah. Because here we are, we don't often hear his voice like audibly, but he speaks through
right.
people, right? And
Yeah. And so
here we have it.
all of these experiences, these moments where things are happening outside of me, they confirm to me that this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. Because it's not, and I mean, people will hear this and think, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't have been, but it's just like, no, actually, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do, because outside of myself, things fell into place in a way that I could not, nor did I influence in and of my own will or power. I put in the work to be present when the doors opened, but I did not open them because I didn't even know these doors existed.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah.
Powerful. So what happens next? This option is made available. What is Dr. Peart? Now, Dr. Peart, what is Marsha then considering?
So, all right. So now I'm going to this master's program. I'm going to med school. So now it was just, I have to do this master's and then I start medical school. And that, for me, that was it. That was, we were on our way to practicing OBGYN, because that was still it for me. So I did the master's in 2 years, graduated magna cum laude there, and then I started medical school in August of 2010.
So there's one timeline that you've amplified for us. Johns Hopkins, graduated in 2002.
Correct. So 8 years later, I officially started medical school. And I cried the first day.
Tears of joy or a combination?
No, tears of joy, because I literally couldn't, I couldn't believe that I was finally sitting here. Like, after everything, I was sitting in my first medical school class. It was, I mean, like, I didn't have words. It's just, God did it in a way that you can't predict these things, right? You can't even plan for them. You just have to be prepared to go to do. You have to be willing to do the work, but you have to know. You can't just wake up and say, this is what I want to do, so I'm gonna do it. There has to be some conviction there. And if you are doing something by faith, you have to be willing to exercise that faith. And you may not know how that's going to unfold or when, but you have to be ready to do so. And I chose, like I said early on, from the age of 14, that I was gonna trust him. I was gonna follow him, not realizing how much that was going to be necessary to fulfilling this purpose for which he created me to do. And the only thing that I did was I kept going. It was, hard is not even enough. It was excruciating, but it was not in me to stop. So I had to keep going. And along the way, he sprinkled, some divine hints to let me know it's okay, keep going. So, he opened the door for Ecuador to happen. He moved in Ecuador, right? Then he allowed me to get the jobs that I did. I got a recommendation from, Memorial Sloan Kettering. He allowed me to get into this master's program that allowed me a guaranteed acceptance into medical school in a program that I didn't know existed. And as we go on, you will see some more things that he's done, right? He allowed me to get into the ABC program, which allowed me to get to the prep school in Wyoming Seminary. And it's just all these little things that happen beyond me. And I don't know why, right? I don't know why this is my story, but this is my story. And I'm just grateful for it.
Here's an excerpt of part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Marsha Peart. And I imagine family support is one thing, but you're now a young adult, woman at home.
Yep.
I'm sure it wasn't a perfect landing.
Nope. There's all of that, right? So there's that whole piece that we didn't touch on, just like personally, I'm not the typical age of anyone going through this process. And because unfortunately, because it took all of me to get through this, there wasn't a whole lot of time for anything else. Like, I was in school basically all my life.
Yeah.
And with intensity, if not in...
Not a way to build relationships.
How?
Yeah.
And then I'm also in